The moment my stepmother announced she was inheriting everything, the lawyer smiled and opened a file labeled Emergency Protocol. She thought she had won, but my father had left me something she never knew existed. A recording device, a safety deposit box key, and the truth about 18 years of calculated cruelty. Tonight, in this mahogany-paneled conference room, 3 lives would change forever. My name is Elena Morrison, and I have spent the last 18 years watching my stepmother Patricia systematically erase me from my father's world. Every birthday forgotten, every phone call intercepted, every attempt at connection severed with surgical precision. Now, sitting across from her in attorney Michael Harrison's downtown office, I was about to witness her final performance. Patricia Cross Morrison commanded the room even in grief. At 55, she wore her widow status like designer armor. Black Chanel suit, pearl necklace, silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. Behind her sat her brother Raymond and his wife Linda, flanking her like bodyguards. They had flown in from Seattle the moment my father died, circling his assets like vultures. The conference room smelled of leather and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Harbor City, where Morrison Construction had helped build half the skyline over 4 decades. The mahogany table reflected our faces like a dark mirror, showing the family that never was. Before we begin the formal reading, Patricia announced, her voice carrying that practiced blend of sorrow and authority I knew so well, "I have documents that supersede whatever version Michael has prepared." The digital clock on the wall read 2:30 p.m. 4 days since we had buried James Morrison at Sunset Hills Cemetery. 4 days since I had stood at his graveside wondering how the man who once taught me to ride a bike had become a stranger who forgot my birthday 3 years running. She produced a manila envelope with theatrical precision, extracting papers that rustled with false importance. A codicil to James's will, properly witnessed and notarized. He signed this 8 weeks ago, when his mind was still clear. I felt the familiar numbness creeping up my neck, the same protective barrier that had carried me through the funeral, through the sympathetic handshakes from business associates who seemed surprised James Morrison even had a daughter from his first marriage. The daughter who had quietly climbed to senior architect at Henderson and Associates without ever mentioning whose blood ran in her veins. Given Elena's prolonged estrangement from James, Patricia continued, addressing the room like a boardroom presentation, her complete absence during his final illness, and her failure to provide any emotional support during his battle with cancer. James decided to redirect her inheritance to family members who demonstrated genuine care and commitment. Prolonged estrangement. Complete absence. The words hung in the climate-controlled air like accusations waiting to take root. I wanted to tell them about the 112 unreturned voicemails, the Christmas cards that somehow never reached him, the hospital visits where I was told he was sleeping only to learn later he had been asking where I was. But I remained silent, studying Michael Harrison's expression. The 62-year-old attorney sat with his hands folded, gray eyes unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been my father's lawyer for 25 years, had drafted the incorporation papers for Morrison Construction, had been at my mother's funeral when I was 12. If anyone knew the truth, it would be Michael. "The amendments are extensive," Patricia said, sliding papers across the polished table. The family home, the company shares, the investment accounts, all designated to family members who were present, who cared, who sacrificed. Family members. Not me apparently. I was just the inconvenient reminder of James Morrison's first marriage, the daughter who looked too much like the wife he had lost to breast cancer. The living ghost Patricia had spent 18 years trying to exorcise. Michael accepted the documents, adjusting his reading glasses as he scanned the first page. The conference room fell silent except for the whisper of turning pages and the distant hum of downtown traffic 30 floors below. Through those windows, Harbor City stretched endlessly, a testament to the empire my father had built from nothing. "Interesting," Michael murmured, a word that could mean everything or nothing. Patricia's supporters shifted in their leather chairs. Raymond placed a protective hand on his sister's shoulder, a gesture so rehearsed it seemed choreographed for this exact moment. They all wore variations of respectful black, a unified front of grief and expectation. I thought about the last real conversation I had with my father 3 years ago, before his diagnosis, before Patricia's walls became completely impenetrable. We had met at a small cafe outside the city, secretly, though I had not understood the secrecy then. He had looked tired, older than his 70 years, and pressed a key into my palm. "Safety deposit box 447 at First National." He had whispered. "When the time comes, you'll know. Promise me you'll remember." The key still hung on a chain around my neck, hidden beneath my black dress. A talisman I had carried for 3 years without understanding its purpose until this moment. "Miss Morrison," Michael's voice pulled me back to the present. "Are you familiar with the contents of this codicil?" "I can imagine," I replied, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. "I'm being written out of the will." "Redirection of assets," Patricia corrected, as if semantics could soften the blade. "James wanted his legacy to benefit those who truly valued him." Michael set the papers aside and opened his leather portfolio. His fingers hovered over his laptop keyboard like a pianist preparing to play. "Well then," he said quietly, "this certainly changes our approach." For the first time since entering the room, he smiled. A subtle expression that Patricia, lost in her moment of triumph, failed to notice. But I saw it, and in that instant I understood why my father had told me to trust Michael Harrison completely, why he had pressed that key into my hand with such urgency. Time had come. The house on Maple Ridge had been my entire universe until I was 12. After Mom died, it became a mausoleum. Her photographs gradually disappearing from walls and mantels, her garden redesigned into something geometric and soulless, her pottery studio converted to Patricia's home office. Patricia arrived 2 years after the funeral. Dad introduced her at a charity gala as a marketing consultant who had helped rebrand Morrison Construction's public image. She moved in 8 months later, bringing interior designers and a mission to modernize our home. I was 14 when I found Mom's jewelry in boxes marked for donation. 15 when her art supplies were sold in a garage sale. 16 when the family portraits lining the staircase were replaced with abstract prints that better suited the new aesthetic. But the house was only the beginning. The real masterpiece was the carefully orchestrated distance that grew between Dad and me, so gradual I didn't recognize it as warfare until years later. "James has back-to-back meetings all week," Patricia would explain when I called from boarding school. "He's completely swamped with the downtown project. Your father has dinner commitments every night this month when I wanted to visit during breaks. Perhaps after the holidays." After the holidays brought new excuses, new commitments, new reasons why my presence was inconvenient. School events went unattended. Graduation ceremonies were missed due to business emergencies that somehow never affected Patricia's schedule. When I graduated summa cum laude from architecture school, Dad sent flowers with a card in Patricia's handwriting. When I won the Harbor City Young Architect Award, he was traveling in Europe with Patricia, unavailable for comment. The summer before my senior year of college, I had driven home unannounced, determined to break through whatever barrier had formed between us. I found them hosting a pool party for Patricia's family and friends, couples from the country club, business associates who had become their social circle. Dad was manning the barbecue, laughing at something Raymond said, looking relaxed and happy in a way I had not seen in years. When he spotted me through the sliding glass doors, his expression shifted through surprise, guilt, and something else I could not name. "Elena," he had said, forcing a smile. "We weren't expecting you. You should have called." Patricia appeared beside him within seconds, slipping her arm through his like a claim of ownership. "How wonderful, though you really should have let us know. All the guest rooms are occupied." I had spent that night in a hotel downtown, my childhood bedroom having been converted to Patricia's exercise room. Clean lines, mirrored walls, no trace of the teenager who had once lived there. The pattern became clearer over the years. Phone calls that Dad never seemed to receive, emails that went unanswered but were later explained as technical difficulties, holiday invitations that Patricia somehow forgot to mention. She had built a fortress around my father, brick by invisible brick, until I appeared to be the absent daughter who had abandoned him. "Don't you think you could try harder?" Well-meaning relatives would suggest at the few family functions I still attended. Patricia says you never visit anymore. How could I explain that my visits were deflected, my calls screened, my very existence filtered through Patricia's careful management? The worst part was the doubt she cultivated in me. Maybe I had not tried hard enough. Maybe I was being selfish, expecting him to prioritize our relationship over his new life. Maybe the distance was my fault for pursuing my career in another city, for not playing by Patricia's unspoken rules. Even Walter Chen, Dad's business partner and my godfather, seemed uncomfortable around me in recent years. His invitations to family dinners grew infrequent, then stopped entirely. When I ran into him at a coffee shop last spring, he had avoided eye contact. "Your father seems very content," he had said awkwardly. "Patricia takes excellent care of him." Only once did the mask slip completely. Dad's 68th birthday, a surprise party Patricia organized at the Harbor Yacht Club. She had invited 300 people. I was not on the guest list. I found out through a mutual friend and showed up anyway, gift in hand. The look on Patricia's face when she saw me was pure Arctic fury, quickly masked by theatrical concern. "Oh dear, I thought you were traveling for work. Didn't your assistant say you had a conference this weekend?" I had no assistant. I had never mentioned any conference. But Dad hugged me that night, held on just a moment too long, whispered words I almost missed. "I've missed you, sweetheart. More than you know." But Patricia was there within moments, guiding him toward other guests, important people, managing the narrative as she always did. The diagnosis came 18 months later. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, aggressive and merciless. I learned about it not from family, but from a Morrison construction employee who assumed I knew. By the time I forced my way through Patricia's protective barriers to see him, he was already deep into treatment, already wrapped in her version of care that somehow never included visiting hours when I was available. "He's very weak today," she would say when I called. "The doctors insist on limited visitors. He had a difficult night, perhaps tomorrow would be better. The new medication makes him confused, and seeing you upset might set back his recovery." I saw him exactly 5 times during his 10-month battle. 5 times. While Patricia's family maintained constant vigil, documenting their devotion on social media, showing their love for a man they had known for less than 2 decades while his only child remained mysteriously absent. Now, sitting in this conference room listening to Patricia claim her final victory, I understood the completeness of her achievement. She had not just stolen my father. She had made me complicit in my own erasure, turned my love into neglect, my presence into absence. But there was still that key around my neck, still Michael's knowing smile, still whatever waited in safety deposit box 447. My father might be gone, but perhaps he had left me the tools to reclaim the truth. The call from Walter Chen came at dawn the morning after the will reading. I had spent the night in my downtown apartment, staring at the harbor lights, replaying Patricia's performance and Michael's cryptic response. "Elena, it's time," Walter said without preamble. "Meet me at First National Bank in 30 minutes. Bring the key. Trust no one else." The drive through empty streets felt surreal, like traveling through a city made of memories. Walter was waiting by the bank entrance, looking older than his 75 years but alert behind his exhaustion. "Your father knew," he said as we walked toward the safety deposit boxes. "He knew everything she was doing." The key turned smoothly in box 447. Inside, a manila envelope thick with documents, a flash drive, and a letter in my father's handwriting, still strong despite his illness. "My dearest Elena," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then Patricia has made her move and I am no longer here to protect you. Please forgive me for the years of seeming distance, for allowing her to hurt you in ways I should have prevented." The words blurred. I blinked hard, forced myself to continue. "I want you to understand that I knew about the intercepted calls, the deleted messages, the systematic campaign to isolate you from my life. I knew and I allowed it to continue. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved you too much to let her destroy you the way she was destroying me." By the time I fully understood what Patricia truly was, she had already woven herself too deeply into my life, my business, my daily existence. She had evidence of minor irregularities in company finances, things done years ago that could be spun into scandals. She controlled my medications, my communications, my very ability to reach out for help. But I am not helpless, and I did not build Morrison Construction without learning how to plan for every contingency. Here is what I have done. The letter outlined a strategy so comprehensive it took my breath away. A pour-over will that superseded all previous versions, executed in secret with Michael as witness. The Morrison Family Trust, established with me as primary beneficiary. A no-contest clause that would strip Patricia of everything if she challenged the real will. Most importantly, 3 years of documentation. Every intercepted call recorded on a hidden device, every deleted voicemail recovered from phone company servers, every lie captured on video surveillance he had secretly installed throughout the house. The flash drive contains everything, the letter continued. Michael has copies of all physical evidence. When Patricia presents her false codicil, as I know she will, Michael will spring the trap I have spent 3 years building. I read the letter twice, then looked up at Walter. His eyes were wet with unshed tears. He came to me 4 years ago, Walter said quietly. Told me everything. How she monitored his communications, controlled his medications, used his illness as a weapon. He was afraid that if he fought her openly, she would escalate, hurt you professionally, destroy your reputation. So he played the long game, I whispered. James was always a chess player, 3 moves ahead of everyone else. He knew Patricia's weakness was her greed. She would assume a sick old man could not outmaneuver her. Walter smiled grimly. She was wrong. The flash drive contained folders labeled by date, each one documenting another piece of Patricia's systematic abuse. Audio recordings of her telling household staff to lie about Dad's availability. Video footage of her entering his office at night to access his computer. Email headers showing the forwarding rules she had set up to intercept his correspondence. But the most damaging evidence was a series of recorded phone conversations with her brother Raymond, discussing their plan to have Dad declared mentally incompetent and seize control of his assets while he was still alive. She was going to have him committed, Walter said, his voice tight with anger. Claim he was delusional, paranoid, no longer capable of managing his affairs. She had already contacted lawyers who specialize in elder abuse cases. I thought about Dad's final months, how he had seemed confused sometimes, forgetful in ways that Patricia was always quick to point out to doctors and visitors. Now I understood it had not been the cancer at all, but the carefully adjusted medications she controlled. There is more, Walter said, pulling out another envelope. This contains evidence of financial irregularities Patricia created in the company books. She was embezzling money and documenting it to make it look like James was losing his mental faculties. The scope of her betrayal was staggering. She had not just isolated him from family and friends. She had been systematically destroying his reputation, his business relationships, his very identity to serve her ultimate goal of total control. Why did he not use this evidence while he was alive? I asked, though part of me already knew. He explains that in his final letter, Walter said, handing me a sealed envelope marked to be opened only after Patricia contests. But I already understood. Using the evidence would have meant a public battle that could have lasted years, dragging the family and the company through scandal and media attention. This way, Patricia had every incentive to take her settlement and disappear quietly, or face total destruction. The second meeting in Michael's office was scheduled for exactly 1 week after Patricia's dramatic presentation. This time I arrived early, watching from the parking garage as her Mercedes pulled in, followed by a black BMW carrying her legal team. She had brought Marcus Webb, a lawyer known for aggressive litigation and flexible ethics. His presence confirmed what Michael had predicted. Patricia was not going down without a fight. In the conference room, the same recording device sat on the mahogany table, its red light blinking steadily. Michael was flanked by 2 associates I had not met before, their briefcases suggesting serious preparation. "Thank you all for coming," Michael began, his tone professionally neutral. As executor of James Morrison's estate, I need to address several issues regarding the codicil presented last week. Webb leaned forward aggressively. My client's position is clear. The codicil is valid and supersedes any previous arrangements. We're prepared to litigate if necessary. Michael nodded slowly, pulling out a thick folder. I have had our forensic document examiner review the codicil you provided. There are some concerning findings. He slid a report across the table. Patricia's micro-expression flickered with uncertainty before her mask of confidence returned. First, the signature date. According to this codicil, James signed it on April 12. However, medical records show he was under general anesthesia that day for a procedure. Rather difficult to execute legal documents while unconscious. Webb's face reddened slightly, but he rallied quickly. Obviously there must be a clerical error in the date. Perhaps, but there are additional issues. The notary public listed, Sandra Williams, moved to Florida 6 months before this was allegedly notarized. She has no record of returning to Harbor City during the relevant time period. Patricia's composed facade began showing cracks around the edges. Most interesting, Michael continued relentlessly, is the paper analysis. The watermark on this document comes from a batch manufactured 3 weeks after James's death. Rather impressive for a man to sign documents on paper that did not yet exist. The room fell completely silent. Webb shuffled through his papers, searching for a defense that clearly did not exist. But let us set aside these technical issues, Michael said smoothly. The real problem is that this codicil, even if it were genuine, would be completely irrelevant. He opened his laptop, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. James executed a new will on February 8, properly witnessed, video recorded, and filed with the probate court. Everything flows into the Morrison family trust. Patricia straightened in her chair, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. Before we proceed to the actual will reading, there is something James insisted I do if anyone presented a competing claim to his estate. He called it his insurance protocol. Michael clicked play on an audio file. Patricia's voice filled the room, crystal clear and utterly damning. Marcus, I need something ironclad, something that will hold up in court. If we move too quickly, people might ask questions. But if we wait too long, she might find a way back into his life. Webb's recorded response crackled through the speakers. Patricia, I have to advise against this course of action. I don't pay you for advice, I pay you for results. That girl is not getting a penny of James's money. I have worked too hard and endured too much. Make sure the documents are perfect this time. Michael paused the recording. There are 43 more files. Would you like me to continue? Raymond had gone pale. Linda was pulling away from her sister-in-law as if Patricia had become radioactive. Webb was frantically checking his phone, probably calculating how quickly he could distance himself from this disaster. Those recordings were obtained illegally, Patricia managed, her voice strained but still defiant. Actually, they were not, Michael replied calmly. James recorded them himself in his own home, during conversations where he was a participant. Perfectly legal in this state. He was quite thorough in his documentation. Furthermore, we have email evidence of systematic interference with Elena's communications, witness statements from household staff who were instructed to lie about James's availability, and financial records showing unauthorized access to his accounts. Should I continue? Michael asked, his tone almost gentle now. We need to caucus with our client, Webb said, standing abruptly. Of course, but before you do, you should understand the complete situation. Michael's expression remained professionally sympathetic. James's actual will leaves 40% of his estate to Mrs. Cross Morrison, a generous provision under the circumstances. However, it includes a comprehensive no-contest clause. Any legal challenge, any attempt to dispute the will's provisions, and that 40% is forfeited entirely. That's coercion, Webb sputtered. That's estate planning, Michael corrected. Perfectly legal and quite common. Mrs. Cross Morrison can accept her 40%, approximately $24 million, or she can challenge the will and receive nothing. Her choice. And if she challenges, I spoke for the first time since entering the room. Every piece of evidence goes public. The recordings, the financial documents, the witness statements, all of it. Patricia's eyes met mine across the polished table. For 18 years, she had worked to erase me from my father's life. Now I held the power to erase her from existence. You would not dare, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The scandal would hurt the company, James's reputation. My father's reputation will survive the truth, I replied steadily. Will yours? Michael cleared his throat diplomatically. There is one more consideration. James maintained a separate investigation fund, completely legal and properly documented, that he used to hire private investigator David Park. Mr. Park has compiled a comprehensive report on certain offshore accounts, questionable expense reimbursements, and various tax positions that might interest federal authorities. That report remains sealed if Mrs. Cross-Morrison accepts the will's provisions. If she contests, it becomes part of the public record. The trap was perfect, every escape route blocked, every contingency covered. My father had spent 3 years building this moment while pretending to be the confused old man Patricia thought she was controlling. I need time to consider this, Patricia said finally, her voice hollow with defeat. Course, Michael agreed politely. You have 72 hours to decide. Accept the will as written or challenge it and trigger the consequences I have outlined. I should mention that the IRS has already expressed interest in Mr. Park's findings. We have been holding them off pending the resolution of estate matters. But if litigation begins, he let the threat hang in the air like smoke. As they gathered their things to leave, Patricia turned to me one final time. He never loved you the way he loved me, she said, venom dripping from every syllable. I smiled, feeling my father's presence in the expression. No, he did not. He loved me more. That is why he spent 3 years documenting your crimes to protect me. And that is why you have already lost. She swept from the room, her entourage trailing behind like debris in her wake. Webb paused at the door, shooting Michael a look that acknowledged their complete defeat. When they were gone, Michael allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Your father would have enjoyed that moment. He did enjoy it, I corrected. He planned every word, every revelation, every crushing realization. He saw it all coming. The recording device continued blinking red, capturing the victory my father had orchestrated from beyond the grave. Patricia had 72 hours to choose between $24 million and complete destruction. For someone who had spent 18 years valuing money above everything else, it was not really a choice at all. The acceptance came 67 hours later, delivered by certified mail with all the enthusiasm of a surrender document. Webb's cover letter was professionally brief, but I could read the defeat between every line. Mrs. Cross-Morrison accepts the terms as specified in the Morrison Family Trust. Please prepare the necessary transfer documents at your earliest convenience. Michael had everything ready within hours. The final meeting was scheduled for the next afternoon, one last gathering in the conference room where Patricia's reign had begun and ended. She entered flanked by Webb and Raymond, her designer armor intact but her eyes hollow. The careful makeup could not hide the fractures in her facade, the understanding that 18 years of careful planning had crumbled in a single week. Michael had arranged the signing with surgical precision. Multiple copies of each document, color-coded tabs marking signature lines, a notary public waiting silently in the corner. The recording device blinked its steady red rhythm, capturing this final performance. Before we proceed, Michael said, extracting an envelope from his briefcase, there is one additional item per James's specific instructions. If Mrs. Cross-Morrison accepted the trust terms without litigation, this was to be delivered. Patricia's name was written across the envelope in my father's careful handwriting. She stared at it like it might burst into flames. What is this? She asked suspiciously. I do not know, Michael replied honestly. James gave it to me 6 months ago with very specific delivery instructions. Patricia opened it with trembling fingers. As she read, her face cycled through surprise, anger, and something that might have been shame. Read it aloud, I said quietly. It's private, she protested. Nothing between you and my father is private anymore. Read it. She cleared her throat, her voice barely audible. Patricia, if you are reading this, you chose pragmatism over principle. That tells me there might still be some fragment of the woman I once thought I knew buried under the calculation and cruelty. I will not pretend to forgive what you have done. The isolation from Elena, the manipulation of my medications, the systematic theft from our family. These things are unforgivable. But I understand why you did them. You were terrified of returning to the poverty you knew before we met. Afraid of losing control, of being abandoned the way you abandoned others. The trust provides for you handsomely. More than you deserve but less than you wanted. Use it to find whatever peace someone like you can achieve. But understand this. I documented everything not just to protect Elena, but to ensure you could never hurt another family the way you hurt ours. My investigators will monitor you indefinitely. Any attempt to remarry wealthy widowers, to insinuate yourself into vulnerable families, will trigger the release of everything. Consider this my final gift. Forcing you to live honestly, perhaps for the first time. You wanted my fortune. You have some of it. You wanted my life. You stole years of it. But you never possessed what truly mattered. My love for my daughter, my memories of my first wife, my integrity. These were never yours to claim. Leave Harbor City. Do not look back. And pray Elena shows you more mercy than I would have. James. The letter fluttered to the table like a fallen leaf. Patricia's carefully maintained composure finally shattered completely. He knew, she whispered to the empty air. All those years he knew everything. Sign the documents, Michael said quietly. It is time to finish this. What followed was methodical and final. Patricia's signature on acceptance forms, non-disclosure agreements, transfer authorizations. Each document was witnessed, notarized, sealed. 18 years of manipulation reduced to ink on legal paper. When the signing was complete, Michael held out his hand expectantly. The house keys, please. Patricia removed them from her purse, fingers lingering on the metal before sliding them across the polished table. All security codes were changed this morning, Michael added. Access cards, garage remotes, and alarm codes have been updated. What about my belongings? Patricia asked, her voice small and defeated. Professional movers will arrive tomorrow at 9 a.m. You may supervise the removal of personal items only. Clothing purchased with your own funds. Jewelry given to you personally, toiletries. Nothing purchased with Morrison money. Nothing with family significance. The Mercedes is leased through Morrison Construction. The keys will remain here. Each restriction stripped away another layer of the life she had built on my father's foundation. There is one final matter, Michael said, producing another sealed envelope. James left instructions that if you signed the agreements willingly, I should give you this. If you refused, I was to open it myself and read the contents aloud. Patricia tore it open with desperate fingers. As she read, her face went completely white. No, she breathed. You cannot do this. What does it say? Webb demanded, but Patricia clutched the letter away from him. With shaking hands, she read the final terms aloud. You must provide a detailed written confession of all illegal activities conducted during our marriage. This confession will remain sealed with the other evidence unless you violate the trust terms. Consider it insurance for both of us. You have 1 hour to decide. Refuse and the acceptance is void. We proceed immediately to full litigation with complete evidence disclosure. That is self-incrimination, Webb protested. I cannot advise my client to sign a confession. It remains sealed unless she violates the trust terms, Michael pointed out. If she honors the agreement, it never sees daylight. If she refuses to provide it, then everything goes public immediately. The room fell silent except for the whisper of air conditioning. Patricia sat frozen, calculating odds in a game where every move led to defeat. 58 minutes, Michael announced, checking his watch. Legal pad and pen are ready. What followed was excruciating. Patricia, guided by Michael's questions, wrote out a comprehensive confession. The medication tampering, the intercepted communications, the embezzled funds, each crime catalogued in her own handwriting. Initial each page, Michael instructed. Full signature at the end. When it was finished, Patricia looked utterly broken. Wealthy by any standard, but completely defeated. "Is there anything else?" she asked, her voice hollow. I stood, looking down at the woman who had stolen 18 years from my father and me. "Leave my city today. Take Raymond, take Linda, take anyone else who helped you. Go far away and never come back." She rose unsteadily, Webb supporting her elbow. At the door she turned back one final time. "What if I had fought you? What if I had refused everything and taken this to court?" "Then you would have lost everything you have," I replied. "My father knew you would choose money over principle. You always did." They left in silence. When they were gone, Michael opened his desk drawer and pulled out a bottle of champagne. James left this with specific instructions to open it when Patricia signed the final documents. The cork popped with celebration. We drank quietly, toasting a man who had orchestrated justice from beyond the grave. The house keys felt heavy in my palm as I stood before 1247, Maple Ridge Drive 3 hours later. I had not been inside in over 5 years, not since that disastrous pool party that had shown me how completely I had been erased. The front door opened smoothly, revealing spaces that felt both familiar and foreign. Patricia had redecorated multiple times over the years, each renovation further removing traces of the family that had lived here before her arrival. But my father had been busy too, I discovered. In the basement workshop, I found boxes labeled Elena's things in his careful handwriting. Mom's pottery, her jewelry, photographs from my childhood, school projects I thought had been thrown away. He had rescued everything Patricia tried to discard, hiding it all in the one place she never went. Among the saved treasures was a leather portfolio containing architectural drawings. Plans for a studio addition to the house, sketched in my father's hand but clearly designed for my use. A homecoming gift 18 years in the making. On the workbench sat a scale model of our house, perfect in every detail. A note was attached in his familiar script. "Started this when you were 15, after our last real conversation before Patricia made them impossible. Kept working on it through all the years she kept us apart. Thought someday we might build the full version together. Maybe now you can build it anyway. Build the life that was interrupted." I carried the model upstairs, placed it on the mantel where Patricia's abstract art had dominated for so many years. Tomorrow, I would meet with the Morrison Construction Board to discuss my new role as majority shareholder. Next week, I would begin the studio addition my father had dreamed about. But tonight I walk through empty rooms full of possibility. In the kitchen, I found one wine glass, Mom's favorite crystal, hidden in the back of a cabinet Patricia had apparently overlooked. I poured wine from a bottle I had brought, raised it toward the ceiling where I imagined my father might be watching. "To James Morrison," I said aloud, "who lost every battle to win the war." My phone buzzed with a text from David Park, the private investigator. Subject departed Harbor City via interstate route, tracking confirmed, no issues to report. Patricia was gone, her exile beginning immediately. She would have her millions, her distance, her life purchased with my father's final act of mercy. But hanging over her forever would be boxes of evidence, a written confession, the knowledge that one violation of the trust terms meant absolute destruction. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom, found it converted to Patricia's meditation space but structurally unchanged. The window still looked out on the oak tree where I had built a treehouse 20 years ago. The reading nook still caught the afternoon light perfectly. From here I could see Harbor City spread below like a constellation of possibilities. Somewhere among those lights was Morrison Construction headquarters, waiting for new leadership. Somewhere was my downtown apartment, soon to be abandoned. Somewhere was the future my father had preserved through patience, planning, and love disguised as weakness. I pulled out my phone, began typing emails that would change everything. To Morrison Construction Senior Staff. Subject: New Leadership Transition. This is Elena Morrison. I will be assuming my position as majority shareholder and CEO effective Monday. Full staff meeting at 8 a.m. We have much to discuss. To Michael Harrison. Subject: thank you. For keeping his secrets, for springing his trap, for protecting me when I did not even know I needed protection. Dad chose his allies wisely. To Walter Chen. Subject: dinner invitation. Home. Really home. At Maple Ridge where it all started. Bring wine and stories about Dad. I want to hear everything Patricia kept from me. The house settled around me. Walls exhaling decades of tension. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Running a construction empire, reclaiming relationships, building the future my father had protected at such personal cost. But tonight belonged to gratitude and grief, to understanding the full scope of a love that had seemed absent but was working always in shadow. James Morrison had spent 3 years dying to give me life back. The least I could do was live it fully. I raised Mom's crystal glass one more time, this time toward the architectural model on the mantel. Dreams in miniature, waiting to be built full scale. Welcome home, Dad, I whispered to the quiet house. We won. Clicked off automatically. Having captured the end of Patricia Cross Morrison's 18-year reign of manipulation. 3 months later, I stood in the executive boardroom of Morrison Construction, looking out at Harbor City's skyline where cranes bearing our company logo dotted the horizon like mechanical prayers. The quarterly board meeting had just concluded, my first as CEO, and the results spoke volumes about the company's relief at legitimate leadership. Revenue was up 18%. Employee satisfaction had reached record highs. 3 major projects that had stalled under Patricia's indirect influence were back on track. The construction empire my father built was thriving under honest management. My assistant knocked and entered. Miss Morrison, there's a David Park here to see you. Says it's about the monitoring report. Send him in, I said, curious about what Patricia's first quarterly surveillance report would reveal. David Park looked exactly like what he was. Former federal investigator turned private security consultant. Methodical, thorough, and utterly professional in his approach to what he called protective documentation. She's in Costa Rica, he announced without preamble, opening a tablet to show GPS tracking data. Small coastal town called Tamarindo. Rented a villa, keeps to herself mostly. No attempts to contact you or anyone connected to the family. Any concerning behavior? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. David smiled grimly. She tried to attend a charity fundraiser in San Jose last month. Big money crowd, lots of wealthy expatriates. Made quite an impression on a retired pharmaceutical executive named Robert Hayes. I felt a familiar chill. She's already hunting again. Was David corrected? Until Mr. Hayes received an anonymous package containing highlights from our documentation. Photos, audio clips, enough evidence to send him running in the opposite direction. Part of the monitoring protocol your father established, David continued. Any attempt to remarry into wealth, any effort to ingratiate herself with vulnerable individuals, triggers immediate intervention. How did she react to losing her target? David pulled up photos taken with a long-range lens. Patricia on a beach, alone, staring at the ocean with an expression of defeat I had never seen before. She's starting to understand that her old methods won't work anymore. Every potential victim receives the same anonymous package. Your father essentially made her unemployable in her chosen profession of exploiting wealthy men. The poetic justice was perfect. Patricia had spent 18 years systematically isolating my father from everyone who might warn him about her true nature. Now she would spend the rest of her life isolated herself. Her reputation preceding her wherever wealthy targets might be found. Any violations of the geographic restrictions? Yes. When? She seems to understand that returning to North America means losing everything. The quarterly payments are being deposited to her Costa Rican account without issue. David closed the tablet. Your father built the perfect prison. Luxurious but absolutely secure. She can live comfortably anywhere in the world except where it matters. After David left, I walked through the executive offices my father had occupied for 4 decades. His portrait hung on the wall, painted 2 years before his diagnosis when he still looked strong and confident. The artist had captured something in his eyes that I now recognized as determination. My phone buzzed with a text from Walter Chen, now serving as my senior advisor despite his official retirement. Board meeting went well. James would be proud. Dinner at the club tomorrow to celebrate. Type back quickly. Yes, but let's make it at the house instead. I want to show you the studio edition. The construction had begun last month, following the exact specifications from my father's hidden drawings. A bright, airy space connected to the main house but separate enough for privacy. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing the garden Mom had originally planted. Natural light perfect for architectural work. It would be completed by Christmas, my first major project as head of Morrison Construction, and my gift to the memory of both parents who had shaped my life in different ways. That evening, I sat in Mom's restored pottery studio, now relocated from storage to its original position in the house's eastern wing. Patricia had converted this space to her home office, but I had gutted it completely, rebuilding it exactly as Mom had designed 20 years ago. The pottery wheel sat in the same corner where afternoon light streamed through windows. Her tools hung on pegboards she had arranged with an artist's eye for both function and beauty. Even the paint stains on the hardwood floor had been carefully recreated from photographs I found in Dad's hidden collection. On the wheel sat a piece I had been working on for weeks, a vase inspired by Mom's style but expressing my own artistic vision. Working with clay had become my meditation, a way to connect with a mother I barely remembered and the creativity Patricia had tried to eliminate from our family. My laptop chimed with an email from Michael Harrison. Elena, quarterly trust distribution processed successfully. All terms being honored. No issues to report. Your father's plan continues to work exactly as designed. Michael. I smiled thinking about the irony. Patricia was living on my father's money, but only as long as she stayed away from everything that had made her life meaningful. She had gained financial security but lost all power, influence, and the ability to harm others. The trust would continue paying her for 3 more years, assuming she honored all terms. After that, she would have to live on her savings and whatever honest work she could find. Given that she had no legitimate job skills beyond manipulation and exploitation, the prospect seemed daunting. But that was not my problem anymore. My father had ensured that Patricia Cross Morrison would never again darken my doorway or anyone else's. Standing in the studio where my mother had created beauty and my stepmother had plotted destruction, I felt the weight of inherited responsibility but also inherited strength. 2 women had shaped this house through their presence and absence. Now it was my turn to fill these rooms with purpose and joy. The architectural model my father had built sat on the mantel in the living room, but I had begun work on a larger version, incorporating the studio addition and other improvements I envisioned. Like him, I was a planner, thinking several moves ahead. Tomorrow I would interview candidates for the head of residential development position. Next week, I would present the board with expansion plans for Morrison Construction's community housing initiative. Next month, I would break ground on the Elena Morrison Community Center, a project funded by the charitable foundation I had established in my mother's memory. Patricia had tried to erase the past. Instead, I was building on it, creating a future that honored both parents while serving the community my father had helped develop. My phone rang, displaying a number I did not recognize with a Costa Rican country code. I almost declined the call, but curiosity won. The voice that came through was barely recognizable, stripped of its former authority and confidence. Lena, it's Patricia. Please don't hang up. I should have. Every instinct told me to end the call immediately. But something in her tone stopped me, a vulnerability I had never heard before. You have 2 minutes, I said coldly. I wanted to apologize, she said, the words rushing together. Not because it changes anything but because you deserve to hear it. I destroyed your relationship with your father, stole years you can never get back, and I did it all for money and control. I waited, saying nothing. I grew up with nothing, Patricia continued. Absolutely nothing. When I met your father, he represented everything I had dreamed of having. the security, the status, the life I thought I deserved. I was so afraid of losing it that I became the monster I was trying to escape. Her voice broke slightly. I know this doesn't matter to you, but I think about him every day. About what we could have been if I hadn't been so terrified, so selfish. He was a good man, and I destroyed that goodness with my fear. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because living with what I did is harder than I thought it would be. The money doesn't mean anything when you're completely alone, when everyone who might care about you knows exactly what you are. Your father made sure I would have to face the truth about myself every single day for the rest of my life. It's a special kind of hell, and I probably deserve it. You do deserve it, I said simply. But the fact that you finally understand that might be the first honest thing you've said in 20 years. Elena, she said, and there was something desperate in her voice now. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But could you tell me something about him? Something good from when he was young, before I poisoned everything. I thought about hanging up. Patricia had forfeited any right to my father's memories when she spent 18 years destroying them. But something in her broken voice reminded me of my own grief, my own need to understand the man I had lost. He built me a treehouse when I was 8, I said quietly. Spent every weekend for 2 months working on it, even though he was afraid of heights. Mom teased him about it constantly, but he kept climbing that ladder because he had promised me the best treehouse in the neighborhood. When it was finished, he painted my name on a little sign and hung it from the front rail. Then he climbed up with a thermos of hot chocolate and we sat there talking about all the adventures we would have. I heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath, what might have been a sob. That sounds like him, she whispered. He would do anything for the people he loved. Yes, he would, I agreed. Even endure 3 years of abuse to protect his daughter from a woman who would have destroyed her life. The call ended in silence. I sat holding the phone for several minutes, thinking about the conversation and what it meant. Patricia's apology changed nothing. She had still stolen 18 years from my father and me, still committed crimes that deserved prosecution, still caused pain that could never be fully healed. But perhaps my father's ultimate victory was more complete than I had realized. He had not just defeated her schemes and protected my inheritance. He had forced her to confront the reality of what she had become, to live every day with the knowledge of what she had destroyed. The money he provided was not generosity. It was the rope she would hang herself with, financially comfortable but spiritually bankrupt. Patricia Cross Morrison would spend the rest of her life wealthy but alone, secure but powerless, free but imprisoned by her own actions. My father had given her exactly what she thought she wanted, then made sure it brought her no joy whatsoever. That night, I dreamed of the treehouse for the first time in years. Dad climbing the ladder despite his fear, Mom laughing as she handed up tools, the three of us planning adventures that would never come to pass. When I woke, I knew what I wanted to build next. A playground behind the community center, complete with the most magnificent treehouse Harbor City had ever seen. A place where other children could make memories with parents who loved them unconditionally. Patricia had tried to destroy the past. But the future belonged to me, and I intended to fill it with everything she had tried to eliminate. Love, laughter, family, and the kind of generosity that builds communities rather than tearing them apart. My father's final victory was not just legal or financial. It was the restoration of hope, the triumph of genuine love over calculated manipulation, the proof that truth ultimately prevails over even the most sophisticated lies. I was James Morrison's daughter in every way that mattered. And I was finally truly home. End. Thank you for listening to this story of justice served with patience and love demonstrated through sacrifice. I hope Elena's journey from isolation to inheritance, from manipulation to truth, has moved you today. Her father's careful planning and ultimate victory show us that sometimes the greatest strength appears as weakness, and the most powerful love works in shadows. Where are you listening from today? Please share your thoughts about this tale in the comments below. Did the father's long-term strategy surprise you? What did you think of Patricia's final phone call? If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. Your support helps these stories reach audiences who need to hear them most. And if you really want to help others discover this tale of family, justice, and the power of unconditional love, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Until next time, remember that the truth has a way of surfacing. Love finds a way to protect what matters most, and sometimes the best victories are the ones that take years to achieve. Take care.